When I heard Saylor saying maybe a year and a half ago that down the track they will look at ways of generating yield on their Bitcoin, this would seem to me they would be absolutely beautifully positioned for that.
When there is no more fiat someday, then probably yes.
Why do you think the TradFi world still doesn't understand fully what he's doing?
Ryan Cohen, we had like a one-on-one meeting with the father of the Bitcoin treasury company industry, and you didn't learn anything. He still has time. Until Bitcoin is 500K a coin, Elon could easily be debanked, lose his contracts, but if he has Bitcoin, he'll be good. I don't think he's understood that yet, even though he understands the problem. There is some valid concern that these treasury companies could trigger the next bear market. Some of the smaller companies that are trading at huge multiple right now to MNAV could blow up.
If we get a parabolic move, we're not going to avoid a bear market.
Most altcoins are created to get Bitcoin, but presenting it as a publicly traded Bitcoin treasury company, that is scary to me of what could be to come. That reminds me of FTX, right?
Archie.
Everyone that's running a Lightning node can route payments. I think it's optional, so you can...
Is that different from having a channel open?
Well, you can open a channel and allocate a portion of that channel to routing. So you can not route and just use it yourself, or you can allocate part of your liquidity in the channel to routing payments. And for doing that, you can get paid, some sats per every payment that goes through. Actually, I think it's percentage based for Lightning channels, but don't quote me on that. But that's how Block is making money. So they're one of the larger Lightning nodes, and there's like a lot of very big Lightning nodes. And because they're so well connected with other Lightning nodes that they can earn a lot of money because everyone wants to connect to the most well-connected nodes. And they're basically like pools of liquidity that are just moving sats back and forth with other big nodes.
So the bigger you are, the more connected you will be. Others will use you because you're a reliable router or a channel. Am I using the right terminology? And so that has a compounding effect. So more people will use it. Okay, that's really interesting. So does that mean that it's not necessarily, anyone can route, but not necessarily everybody's going to generate those kinds of returns?
Probably not. So they're big and they can earn that kind of yield on their Bitcoin because they're that big. But if it's like just you wanting to set up and make that, I don't know. You'd have to invest more capital, be online longer so people know your node is established, because it's sort of like a heartbeat. Like if you've been around for 5 years, like people saying that you're reliable, looking to you.
Yeah, because when I heard Saylor saying maybe a year and a half ago that down the track they will look at ways of generating yield on their Bitcoin, this would seem to me, at least on a global scale, to facilitate sort of global commerce for an organization of scale, shall we say. Like they would be absolutely beautifully positioned for that. I don't know whether or not, any channel is going to need $70, $80 billion worth of liquidity, but could that be an opportunity for them to generate yield off their Bitcoin and potentially be like a global liquidity hub of Bitcoin earning yield on what is essentially otherwise, at this point, a dormant asset, right?
Post-hyper-Bitcoinization, yes. But right now, I think Saylor can generate more yield by borrowing or selling converts or bonds to buy more Bitcoin.
But he can do the same, so one doesn't negate the other, right? He could be using the Bitcoin routing channels, routing payments on a channel, right? He can do that. It doesn't stop him borrowing against it, does it? Because does that put your Bitcoin at risk when you're routing payments?
Well, it would be in a hot wallet. So every Lightning node is a hot wallet. Right. So it's connected to the internet and those funds are exposed to the internet, right? So there is some risk to doing that. But you have to calculate, what is Square's yield again that they said that they were
I think it was in the order of 10%.
Yeah. So the question is,
like that, yeah.
Well, so if Saylor took some Bitcoin and put it into a Lightning node and he's earning 10% on that, then that's not Bitcoin that, he can borrow against or pledge, right?
Technically or theoretically, it's at risk because it's in a hot wallet.
Yeah, well, it's deployed. I don't know. Maybe he could, but I think from his point of view, that's like picking up pennies in front of the steamroller. He can just keep it all in cold storage with custodian and borrow massive amounts, sell bonds to get massive amounts of fiat to buy more Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And I
So
think-
I've just looked it up. It was 9.7% that they earned.
Yeah.
Which is, that's tempting, right? I mean, I know for Michael Saylor, it's not really tempting given what their current business model is. But at some point, it's going to make sense for them to do some of this, assuming hyper-Bitcoinization. I mean, it doesn't have to be hyper-Bitcoinization, right? It's kind of like AI with the singularity. It doesn't have to reach singularity before it presents a threat to humanity. And we don't need hyper-Bitcoinization before Bitcoin becomes a significant chunk of, I don't know, global commerce or a store of value, means of exchange, those sorts of things.
One of the strategies metrics is Bitcoin yield generated, right? And that's basically using the Bitcoin they have to get more Bitcoin. And I think it's something like 100% yield or something like that. So do you want 9 or 100? I think it's better to do what he's doing now. And you can do that as long as the fiat money printing system exists. You're basically harnessing that and turning it into Bitcoin. But when there is no more fiat someday, then probably yes, putting it into a Lightning node and routing payments could be a way to keep generating more Bitcoin.
Oh, that's fascinating. Why do you think the TradFi world still doesn't understand fully what he's doing?
But don't they? I mean,
don't
we
think
have
they
so
do.
many. We have so many copies of strategy coming up now.
I don't look at that as TradFi doing that. If it was TradFi doing it, JP Morgan will be spinning up their own Bitcoin treasury account company with Larry Fink's already doing his ETF. But we would be seeing a lot more financial entities spinning out their Bitcoin treasury reserve companies. What I see at the moment happening is a bunch of independent CEOs and founders of relatively small companies, right? Recognizing the benefit to their company of adopting Saylor's playbook and reaping the rewards with respect to market cap. But we're not seeing anybody starting at scale. We're seeing a lot of small companies reaching out for scale, right? Ramping up to that level. Like MetaPlanet was really quite a small company to begin with, right? And now, what is it, $5 or $6 billion, right? But in the overall landscape, that's still a smallish company, right? Yeah. It's getting there, 10, 20, 30 billion. We're starting to talk about like a significant company on a global scale. And I think they could quite foreseeably get there, not too distant future.
But when you're saying TradFi, you're kind of speaking
Wall
to the
Street.
banks, right?
I'm talking Wall Street. Anything, and yeah, that's right. That's what I'm talking about. It's like, why aren't they? So they were quite quick to spin out ETFs in the ETF market, are quite quick to spin out all these other financial products, but they're not really in the game for Bitcoin treasury vehicles, right? And then when SPACs became popularized, suddenly like a whole bunch of people were doing SPACs from TradFi, right? And then they died off and maybe they'll come back. But Bitcoin treasury reserve companies, am I mischaracterizing it in saying that it's mostly a bunch of independent entrepreneurs of smaller companies who are doing that? Because that's all I'm seeing. Maybe I've missed something, but MetaPlanet seems to be the second biggest doing a Bitcoin treasury reserve.
Well, GameStop is doing it.
Are they yet?
They have some of Bitcoin, right? They bought some.
Yeah.
They didn't buy as much as they should have bought.
Okay, let's talk about that, right? Let's talk about it. They had $5.5 billion in cash. They raised another.
They're raising another billion plus.
But before that, they raised.
Yeah.
They raised 500 million or something, and now they're going to raise another billion plus after buying 500 million or so of Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, but they didn't allocate most of the previous raise to buy Bitcoin.
And so they're being very tentative when they don't need to be. Like they could have literally bought 4 billion, 5 billion in Bitcoin and had $1 billion in cash spare. Why do you think they didn't do that? Because you're a corporate strategy guy, right? So let's tap into your corporate strategy brain from the Blockstream days. And how are you playing that game if you were them? Or what do you think they're doing?
If I was Ryan Cohen, I would have put all of it into buying Bitcoin because that wasn't what the market expected him to do. You're going to raise, they publicized their thing. They made like an investor website looking like Berkshire Hathaway. They did all those things. And the market expected you're going to put all that into Bitcoin. And he didn't. So I think that was the first mistake, that you didn't commit to the strategy. And I guess the second mistake was not executing even when there were opportunities to execute, like dips. He could have he might have missed that first initial chance to buy, which I can understand because when Bitcoin is down, it's scary, right? But he could have averaged in, 500 million every month or something like that for a few months. But he didn't do that either. So I'm not sure. I think it's just fear. And given that he met with Saylor, that's really inexcusable because you had like a one-on-one meeting with the father of the Bitcoin treasury company industry, and you didn't learn anything from that meeting. So, I'm not sure if he's going to make it, but there's still an opportunity because I think anything below 200K per Bitcoin is still a steal. So he could still do it.
He could still do it. And I wonder whether or not he has any conviction or whether he was just harvesting the hype
to raise the
cash,
capital.
more capital. I mean, he did that in the last bout of sort of roaring kitty hype when he came back, right?
Yeah.
Raised a few billion or whatever it was. And prior to that as well, when they had the short squeeze on. But what has he done with the cash to build out the business to really transform it into being anything more than it was before? I guess I am asking the question rather than offering it as a critique, but I don't perceive GameStop as being materially different today than it was, 4 years ago when there was a huge short squeeze. And that's with a whole bunch of cash on hand. Where was the transformation? I think they've done a bunch of efficiencies and whatnot, cutting out businesses they don't want to hold. But where's the vision and the direction? So I'm not sure he has a conviction one way or the other.
I would say I haven't seen it yet, but I'm optimistic that he can figure it out. So
You are optimistic?
Well, I mean, he still has time. Until Bitcoin is 500K a coin, he still has time. But we know that is like a mainstream-ish company. I would quantify it as Wall Street that has made that dip, right? They're not fully in, but they did commit to it, right? Probably better so than Tesla, I would say at this point.
What do you mean better?
Well, Tesla bought and they sold, and Elon never followed through on his promise because he was saying, I'll accept Bitcoin for coherence again if Bitcoin mining is 60% green or something
50%,
like that.
yeah.
50%.
Yeah.
He
We'd long surpassed
Yeah.
that, and I kept reminding him, and he never responds, of course.
Yeah, so I would say GameStop is further along than Tesla, and I would say both of those are Wall Street companies. So we're seeing that movement, but of course, it's not where we think it should be, nor where it really should be, right? Like Microsoft last year had a chance to do something when shareholders pushed them for creating a treasury, but then they also voted against it.
I'd make the opposite argument in favor of Elon, actually. And I know he, last cycle, I'm well aware of what he did, and he sort of got in when the hype was big, and then he sold, and everyone was kind of disappointed with his about turn with respect to taking Bitcoin as payment, right? Yeah. But he held on to that Bitcoin. His company's held on to that Bitcoin. He owns it personally.
He sold some too.
Testing
liquidity.
No, but that's I sort of pointed that out. He bought a whole bunch, $1.5 billion at that time, and then he sold a bunch. But then he held on. I think Tesla has $1.5 billion Bitcoin. SpaceX probably has. I'm pretty sure Arkham has revealed their addresses, and SpaceX has a similar amount. And he's also a personal holder. So he hasn't sold since that testing liquidity nonsense.
Is he a personal holder? He said publicly.
He said he is.
He has like a quarter of a Bitcoin or something like that.
I didn't catch that. I don't know that he's quantified it publicly. I may have missed it. But he did say he has a personal holding of Bitcoin, and all his companies hold Bitcoin, he said. And so at least he's held on to that, which is now 4 years since he did that. Whereas GameStop...
Is that strategic though, or is it just because he got busy with Department of Efficiency and everything?
You don't forget $1.5 billion on the balance sheet.
Well, for a big company like that, it's easy to forget about it, I think. I don't think he's actively thinking about it.
But that's how insurance should be, right? So like there's a difference between being orange-pilled all in, right, like many of us are, and some people view Bitcoin as, and rightly so, as insurance. If the system goes belly up, at least they've got insurance against currency debasement, hyperinflation, right? And at one point, nobody was sure whether or not there was going to be a runaway train of inflation. And so I think insurance, the best insurance is something that you buy and forget about, and it's always there. And I think that's a legitimate way to treat Bitcoin for a lot of people who have other productive means of building out services and products and whatever. And then also as a storage and savings mechanism. Because it's okay to have other focuses in life,
Yeah.
we need people building out the world and making it operate, right?
That's true. But you remember during the last election, I think Elon was saying something like, if Trump didn't win, then, it's over for me, right? Because he was in full support of Trump and attacking the Democrats. And, if Trump didn't win, he would have a big problem on his hands. And then a few weeks ago, he and Trump had that falling out, right? So I think he should kind of clue in that maybe he should allocate more attention, at least, to Bitcoin. Because that's a safety net, right? He could easily be debanked, lose his contracts, everything like that. But if he has Bitcoin, he'll be good. I don't think he's understood that yet, even though he understands the problem.
Yeah, I do think $1.5 billion for a company of Tesla's size is underallocated, that's for sure, yeah. So I'm not arguing against that point, that's for sure. I think a company of Tesla's size and cash balance should have more than I don't know, what is their cash balance? 10, 20 billion?
Something like that.
Yeah, they should have more than $1.5 billion of that in Bitcoin.
Yeah. But I think Apple has even more. Berkshire has what? How many? 500 billion in cash?
Well, interesting because I tweeted a thread of Apple's strategy to dominate Bitcoin finance, right? And I've repeated that a couple of times. And it was basically, they had $150, $160 billion of cash. Buy Bitcoin, and as the most trusted entity in the world, you could afford to offer your Bitcoin stash as a backstop to any kind of security breach as a Bitcoin bank. Now, I'm not encouraging you depositing your Bitcoin with a custodian, right? But that's how most of the world will want their Bitcoin to be custodied by a trusted third party. That's just the way it is. We may not like it as the as the operator of a Bitcoin wallet, but even so, your wallet is a hot wallet, right? I get it. I use cold storage myself. Most of the world wants a trusted third party. You're just not going to get away from that.
Most of the world doesn't even want a trusted third party. They want a stock that has Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That's what we're seeing right now. It's an interesting phenomenon. So not even raw exposure to an ETF that has Bitcoin with custodian, but they want the upside and potential gains of a company with Bitcoin.
Yeah, the sovereignty aspect is probably a bit down the list because not many people have gleaned the real risk of debanking as being applicable to them.
Yeah.
And I think that's a naivety that infects most of the population, that they're kind of oblivious to that. And it's the number go up, inflation hedge type of thing that is the narrative that is most relevant to them. Yeah. Fair enough. Not everybody's fighting the state. Not everybody cares to have an opinion that's going to be, I guess, going to get them debanked, right?
But it's not necessarily a bad thing. If you look at it, a lot of Bitcoiners probably came for Bitcoin gains back in the day. And then they went down the rabbit hole later on and understood, okay, it's a bearer asset. It's a way to protect my sovereignty. And it's insurance. So it's not necessarily bad that people are buying these stocks that have Bitcoin in them if they learn about Bitcoin. And not all of them will, but some of them will, right?
My take on the whole Bitcoin treasury strategy thing for these companies is, why do you care? Why do people care that they're in existence? People spend so much of their time bitching and moaning about the fact that they're there. And I'm like, why do you care? Are you buying them? If you're not buying them, it doesn't affect you really. It doesn't affect Bitcoin. It might on the back end of this, if we get a bear market of the like that we just came out of.
Well, there is some valid concern that these treasury companies could trigger the next bear market. Something blows up. Right.
Well, my point is something is going to trigger the next bear market. If we get a parabolic move, which seems to be everyone's rooting for, well, we're not going to avoid a bear market, and something's going to trigger the bear market to wash out the excesses of that, right? And I think at that point, these Bitcoin treasury companies will be emblematic of the excesses of that kind of move.
It depends, I think.
Okay.
I think like a strategy type company where they have very minimal risk and all of their converts and everything are very far out will be fine. But some of the smaller companies that are trading at a huge multiple right now to MNAV, which are not as well positioned as strategy is, could blow up.
Yes, you're right. I did make that distinction in an earlier conversation with Mark Moss, is that I don't believe Saylor's company poses a risk in that regard, because I believe they're extremely well managed and disciplined. I don't have the same level of faith for all the long tail of companies in this space of treasury strategy companies. And so I guess my comments are addressing solely the long tail, because I think even Metaplanet as a much smaller company is, pretty focused and disciplined in how they're running their business. But inevitably we're going to get, the greed's going to attract people who are not as disciplined. Huh?
But we don't know yet which is the thing.
It's inevitable. We know it's going to happen. We know. We just don't know to what scale they're going to come into the space.
It's probably going to be, I don't know, maybe Tron or something. You saw they're going public, right? And now they're a Bitcoin treasury company.
Do you know that guy?
Justin Sun? Yeah, I know him.
You know him? Okay. He's like this. I just see him every now and then floating to every controversy with a comment. I have no idea who he is. I don't think I've ever seen an interview of him. Like, he could just be an avatar for all I know. Like, you know what I mean? It's like he's a real person. He actually exists in reality, right?
Yeah, he does exist. But, like altcoins becoming Bitcoin treasury companies, that reminds me of FTX, right? Like, why did FTX blow up?
FTX more than Luna?
Probably, because FTX, what it was they were using FTT, their token, as a backstop and equivocating it with, as a real asset, even though they printed it. So I think the danger there is if you have something similar set up with an altcoin, like, what is it, Cardano, they're also talking about doing something too. It just blows my mind that
we're all Bitcoiners now.
Yeah, everyone's a Bitcoiner. But I mean, most altcoins are created to get Bitcoin. So it's not that far from the origin, right? But presenting it as a publicly traded Bitcoin treasury company, that is scary to me of what could be to come.